Hey there, youth and youth families, and welcome back to this time of Table Talk and Curbside Youth, where we are talking about prayer. And today we are in Matthew chapter 6, verse 12, where the passage says this, "And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors." I don't know if you learned it in the King James Version, which I did, and it's the version that we kind of recite more frequently is, "And forgive us our trespasses," or I guess the word could be sins, "as we forgive those who sin against us." I'm going to imagine for a second that you are human. And one of the things that I know that in relationships, whether they be at home or school or church or just in life, if you're human, they require a lot of forgiveness. Now, I notice that Jesus, in this case, doesn't teach the disciples to pray something like, "Hey, give us justice," or fairness, or something like that. And those would be really great things, but they're not what he says here. Jesus teaches them that they should pray for forgiveness. He doesn't say, and this is kind of the thought that I'll kind of act on, right? The thought that I'll have is he doesn't teach them to pray that others will see things their way or our way, which is often the way that I pray. God, change their mind so that they can know that they're wrong and they need to ask me for forgiveness. Instead, we pray with the assumption that we are willing to forgive simply because God has forgiven us. Now, I want to acknowledge that everyone can probably think of in their mind an extreme example that really complicates what I just said there. And that is not what I'm trying to talk about right here. Of course, there's larger discussions that would take more than a 10-minute video to talk about. But generally, I want us just to focus on the principle about forgiveness and prayer, and that we need to keep these things in mind as we learn how to pray. So let's backtrack just a little bit. Why is this thought about forgiveness in prayer so important? Well, relationships are important because God has created us for relationship with Him and with others. And relationships work best when we have an attitude of peace and surrender, rather than advocating for what is fair in relationships. We're often, as humans, really bad judges of what is fair. I always want just a little bit more, and the other person wants just a little bit more than I'm willing to give, and we often wrestle around fair, and forgiveness is a much better place to come from. Relationships need forgiveness because we realize that we often judge or act or speak before we have a complete picture of the situation. And that's why forgiveness is so important. How many times have you gotten into the heat of an argument only to realize, even though you were convinced that you were right, that there was a whole nother part of that situation that you didn't see? That's why forgiveness is so important. Praying that God would grant us forgiveness as we forgive might sound like a pretty passive way to live, that we're always letting people off the hook. And we think of the phrase, let's just forgive and forget, and that's not really the whole picture. This prayer is one that reminds us to be mindful of being humble and understanding, and of being aware that forgiveness is one of those things that brings about health and vibrance into our relationships. Too often we hold on to things like bitterness, which leads and creates a whole lot of tension. If we continually pray that God would forgive us as we forgive others, our thoughts of hurt are replaced with feelings of grace. As you walk around your house today with your pad of frog notes, I want you to look around for the things that remind you of God's forgiveness and your need to forgive others. And it might be weird if we were to just kind of take this message and be very literal and look for forgiveness and write little notes of confession and stuff like that. That might not be the most helpful in this particular activity. So this is what I'm going to encourage you to do. Let's just go on the flip side of that. As you wander around your house and you're praying, for that attitude of forgiveness, I wonder if you could just, as you come across the things that remind you of areas that require forgiveness, just leave a little note of encouragement for the people that you might find that same place there. Maybe something like this. Write a little note. I love you because you always have my best interests in mind. Sometimes the people that we have conflict with are the people that we don't realize actually really deeply love us and are just advocating for our best interests, even when we don't see it. Or maybe leave a little note behind like, I love you because you always make me laugh when I'm feeling down, or you love me unconditionally even when I'm a little crusty. And so spend a little bit of time going throughout your house, looking for the things that remind you of God's forgiveness or our need to forgive others, leaving little notes of encouragement. Wouldn't it be nice if some of your family members might do the same and leave some notes that you can come across? I just pray that this time would bring you some blessings and blessing on your day.